In this lesson, we will create the primary bone objects for the character's face. Something I like to do when getting started is to just kind of grab the entire mesh and go ahead and reset its X form. That way we don't have any weird transformation issues as the mesh deforms. So what we can do is go ahead and head over to our Utilities tab, choose Reset, Reset Selected. And now, you can see once we do that, if we were to head over to our Modify panel, you'll notice we have this X-form modifier that we'll also have to clean out. So no worries, if we were to go ahead and grab all of those items that we have reset, we can then go back to Utilities and choose Collapse. Collapse selected using this first choice, Modifier Stack Result, which will preserve the state of the mesh. So since this mesh is an editable poly, it will remain an editable poly. If we use that second choice underneath Collapse, it'll get converted to an editable mesh. Okay, so once we've managed to do that, the next step is to just go ahead and freeze our transforms so we can always get back to this position in case the mesh were to be offset accidentally. We can always get back to home base here. So again, with everything highlighted, we can now Alt-right click and choose Freeze Transform in our Animation Quad menu. Now when we choose Yes, each object has been frozen. So what does that mean? When we grab the character's face, let's grab our Move tool with the W key. If we were to go ahead and move the face, oops, I made a mistake. Well, all we need to do is Alt-right click and choose Transform to 0, and it goes right back. So we'll be using this quite often for bone objects, for controls, things like that. Again, just to make sure we can quickly get back to this skin pose. Sweet. All right. We are ready to get started. Let's say we go ahead and move over to our side view. We'll press Alt-W. Here's the left side. We'll go ahead and switch over to that view. We'll now go ahead and press F3 so we can take a look at things in wireframe mode. All right, great. So we start to place our bone objects. Let's make sure we're placing them in anatomically correct points. That way we can get some realistic looking deformations. And we'll be talking more about that as we progress. But let's say we go ahead and begin by grabbing our bone tools. Now, if we were to Alt-right click to get back to the Animation Quad menu, you can see that mine might look a little bit different from yours. I have several tools here that I've added, and this is very easy to do. I'll show you. But I've added this to the Animation Quad menu just so we can access these tools faster. Rather than going to Animation, grabbing bone tools, or going to Constraints and then picking through a list of constraints here, take a look. All we need to do is go ahead and Alt-right click, and here are all of our tools. How do we do that? Simple. We just head over to Customize, Customize User Interface. From there, we can go to our Quads tab, and then we can go ahead and pick the quad menu we'd like to work with. Here's Animation. And now it's just a matter of adding commands from the All Commands list here. So let's say if we wanted to add our orientation constraint, we can go ahead and select in this list first, and then go ahead and press the O key to get to the O section. We can then go ahead and scroll down until we find the orientation constraint. Getting close, getting close. Almost there, there it is. All right, so now it's just a matter of dragging and dropping. So we can go ahead and drag it inside of our menu. And it's as simple as that. And how about these separators? How do we create those? Well, simple. Here's the separator here. We simply go ahead and drag that into our menu. So you can see this is how I've organized things from the bone tools to the constraints here. Now, if you ever need to go ahead and remove any of these, it's really simple. So if I were to go ahead and right-click and choose Delete Menu Item, there it goes. It's removed. I'll do that for this orient constraint. And take a look. I have another orient constraint that is not needed because here's one right here in the constraint section. So we can always just go ahead and right click and choose Delete Menu Item, and now it has been removed. Awesome. So I've added things like attribute holders, so we can quickly go in and create those if we're creating custom attributes, and groups. I've added all of the grouping tools that I use primarily right here. The Reaction Manager. This is very helpful for creating control in a relative type of way. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. All right, so again, everything that we need to kind of work faster, we can go ahead and add these tools here. So feel free, if you do not want to work with this, you most certainly don't have to. You could always just go ahead and access these tools from the animation menu, but you might find that the quad menu is a little bit faster to work with. one more thing I'd like to point out to you is that you can go ahead and save out your quad menu. So if I were to go back to quads, go back to animation, you'd simply go ahead and click on save. So you can see I've saved my file as custom anim. And I'll go ahead and provide that in the project files if you'd like to work with this. To install it, it's really simple. It's just a matter of making sure that you go ahead and click on load and go ahead and load in that file. Alright? It's nice that 3ds Max makes this process very straightforward. So we can just jump right in and get to work. So go ahead and access the bone tools. If you don't want to use your quad menu, you'd head over to animation and grab the bone tools from here. We can then go ahead and click on create bones. Let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at our initial bone size. So as we start to create this, you can see that the bone is a little bit thin. Alright, so what this means is that we can either use the size if we need it. This might be great for, let's say, an eye bone, but for the neck and head where the radius of the bone matters because that's going to determine the initial skinning we have. So if that's the case, well then we might want to go ahead and change the size. So here's what I like to do. I like to just go in, grab the bone object, and then head over to the width and height parameters. We can start to adjust those. You can see it might be better to do that from the perspective view because we're adjusting the width right now. We don't have an idea as to what it's really doing until we start to adjust the height. And then we can start to see exactly what is happening and what value would be ideal. So it's up to you. If you want to go ahead and do that from your perspective view, you most certainly can. But either way, once you have found a value you'd like to work with for either your width or height, make sure you use that value for both to keep the bone size uniform. So I'll go ahead and use about 0.05 for the height, copy that, and then go ahead and use that for the width as well. Great. So you can see that the size is going to be ideal for us. We'll have to refresh the nub because if we try to do that on the nub object, if we try to adjust the width or height, you'll notice that it will skew. No worries, if we were to delete that, click on the root and click Create N in our bone tools, now we have a brand new nub. Really neat. And these sizes here that we see, these values, they're all determined from our unit setup preferences. So if we were to go here, we can go ahead and just double check to make sure that these are set for our game specs. So you can see here, working with meters. And then if we were to go ahead and click on System Unit Setup, have this set to inches, but it depends on what engine you're using. You might even have this set to centimeters. Alright, so it really depends on your preferences. So go ahead and leave that at centimeters, go ahead and click on OK, and then click OK once again to set the preferences. And there we go. You can see how our size has changed just slightly here, according to those new preferences. Alright, sweet. So let's go ahead and start to work with these settings. See, now we're working with about 0.02. So I'll just go ahead and copy that value. Let's go ahead and remove this bone object. We'll go back to our side view here, and we'll go ahead and choose Create Bones. Let's go ahead and change our width and height from here. So we'll go ahead and paste those values in of 0.02. And we'll go ahead and get started with the neck. So we'll go ahead and create our neck bone, and then we'll have that end right where the head would pivot from. That's right around the lower part of the ear. And then we can go ahead and finish the head's chain, clicking at the top. Now we'll go ahead and right click to exit this chain. Alright, sweet. So now what we can do is go ahead and add a jawbone. I won't click on the head bone because that will add the bone to the next hierarchy. So here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and click near our head bone because this is where the jaw should pivot from. Then we'll click at the chin and then right click to exit our chain. Alright, sweet. So from here, let's go ahead and right click again to turn off bones mode. And now we can go ahead and take our root for the jaw. Let's go ahead and select that. Turn on bone edit mode and simply press Shift A and click on the head bone to make sure that the pivot of the jaw is aligned to our head. And this is exactly what we want to get the right pivot point. Alright, we can now go ahead and turn off bone edit mode. Very important. We want to make sure we turn that off when it's not needed. Otherwise, you'll notice that your bone objects, they'll get thrown off, things like that, and it's pretty nasty. Okay, great. Well, take a look. We have our primary bones in place. Here's what we can do now, just to kind of finish up. We can first go ahead and hide our mesh layer. We can then make sure that the jaw is linked to our head bone. Once we do that, we will then go ahead and select our neck. We'd press Control page down to grab the entire hierarchy. Then we can press Alt and then the right mouse button to access our animation quad menu, choose Freeze Transform, then click on Yes. The beautiful thing about this is when we start to, let's say, test our bone objects as we rotate them around, hey, I need to get back to my skin pose. Well, if you run out of undos, you're stuck. But if you were to Alt right click and choose Transform to 0, it pops the bone object right back. Great. Another thing we can do with all of those bones selected, so again, I'll go ahead and grab the neck. This time I'll double click. This is another way of grabbing an entire hierarchy. But with all of these selected, we can now go ahead and create a new layer for all of our bone objects, and we'll call that skeleton. So I'll go ahead and click on Create New Layer. See, it's the active layer, so what I'll do is go ahead and make sure default is active, so we don't start to alter any preferences on any new objects we create. They'll all get added to this default layer. All right, so once we make sure it's active, we can go to our new layer and name that skeleton. All right, sweet. So we now have a very convenient way to either show or hide the skeleton or freeze it if we need to see it, but we don't want to select it. Great, now finally, let's say we just go in and rename these objects. So for all objects that we will skin to, I like to use the prefix BN. So that's BN neck 01. Let's go ahead and copy that, head over to the head bone, paste, and that's going to be BN head 01. Let's copy that to rename the nub. Now the nub, we won't be skinning to that because it's not needed. We can skin to the head bone. Now if you decided to kind of animate the nub and change its position and have that affect your rig, well then that is when you'd want to skin to your nub object. But since it's not necessary, it's only a way of kind of figuring out the direction of your chain and finishing that chain out. Here's what we can do. We can go ahead and rename this to BE for bone end head 01. So how about the jaw? Well, we can go ahead and paste and change BN head to BN jaw 01. I'll go ahead and copy that, so we can go ahead and rename the nub to BE jaw 01. All right, sweet. So there we have it. We have our initial skeleton in place. It's added to a layer. Everything's looking nice. Let's say we go ahead and move on to the brows and the eyes in the next lesson.